僕なら年収今の倍出すけど、いい会社でキャリア積みたいでしょ?
Yeah, as it turned out, we need a few extra hands for this year's Black Friday, so could you come work for us, please? Like right now. Continuing from where we left off last week, Nikoyama had been struggling to fulfill the program request from Kana and Hitomi as his laptop was already being overclocked with just 2 spells. Having realized that he probably should have simplified some of his programs, made him flash back to his early days as a magic programmer because mental breakdowns don't take up that much time in real world, right? Though strangely enough, his flashbacks start off an early Magilumiere that he wasn't working at yet.
How did you know about the parts you weren't there for?
Ah, that's a story for another time, I'm afraid.
Also, geez, y'all usually set your AC to 28°C or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. I'd be roasting in that office. Anyway, they were looking for a new engineer for their company, who of course would eventually be Nikoyama. Though interestingly, Shikimoto said they needed someone who was obsessive, or as the original Japanese put it. Yeah, that seems about right. Anyway, Nikoyama's name came up in a high school magic programming contest entry list. Though at the time of this flashback, he was actually in college and doing more of this sort of programming in his spare time, which, hey, I get as someone who does make these YouTube videos as an aside. I especially relate to someone whose hard drive is running out of space and can't afford to delete most of my videos. It's almost as if a certain website should be a lot more supportive of their creators and not so focused on preventing ad blockers. But yeah, while he was quote-unquote obsessive enough to recreate spells from his favorite knockoff Precure anime, which are actually pretty decent, he had also resigned to the idea that he should do this stuff more as a hobby, as turning it into an actual job doesn't exactly work out all the time.
溜め込んだ知識も温めていた理想も全部注いだ。自分の落選が信じられなかった。
Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those episodes, isn't it? Alright. Let's do this. With that, Nikoyama flashed back in his flashback because of course someone this obsessive can't stick with one time period. He recalled his high school days when he entered into that magic programming contest and had put his all into it, only to not even receive an honorable mention. Thus, like a bit of a sore loser, he tried to share and explain his program to all of his friends, whose replies to it were basically... Okay, they were actually being a little nicer and told him that he had likely gone a little too far with his programming and probably could have stood to show a little more restraint. It was fair criticism and insight, but for Nikoyama, it did end up striking a nerve as it made him feel like his programs were of no value to anyone. Thus, once he entered into college, he decided to keep his obsessions that he used to passionately talk about in high school to himself.
熱い思いが急に恥ずかしくなって。 人前で魔法のことを話すのも嫌になった。
Stop! All of our life points are already at 0! Yeah, this is easily one of the most real scenes I've seen in a long time in any sort of work of fiction, not just anime. It's the idea that sometimes the real world just won't be entirely receptive to us, especially when it comes to our passions and hobbies. As we'll soon see, part of the reason Nikoyama had failed the contest in high school was likely because his thirst for expressing himself through his programs led him to going outside of the parameters of the contest. Parameters that were likely based off of the restrictive needs of big corporations who often want even more specific products in order to maintain maximum efficiency and productivity. Now, of course, this isn't necessarily a bad thing at all, it's just following a standard regulation that guys like Nikoyama just couldn't. That said, it is also a pity that it does result in talented guys like him slipping through the cracks. Hell, while magic programming is basically computer programming in this world, you could also extend this idea to other hobbies that people try to turn into careers. For instance, as I just said, and as much as I do enjoy making these YouTube videos, I have decided to make them on the side because early on I realized I really couldn't turn this into a career. I mean, on top of needing to deal with copyright claims, I also realized that much of my taste in anime isn't exactly mainstream, so it was never going to reach much of a general audience, which again is what companies like YouTube want more than anything. Videos and creators like that will often be pushed more and in turn likely garner them greater profits. It's all just a part of the system. Now don't get me wrong, I'm still very thankful for the audience we do have here, as it at least means that this work is resonating with others, and that was also kind of the case for Nikoyama. Having seen his old contest entry, Shikimoto had decided to scout Nikoyama. Then, as we said, he had gone beyond the regulations of the contest, which might be a bit of a deterrent for big name companies that do need to adhere to standards, but as the show keeps pushing, startup companies like Magilumiere could make their own rules. Thus, they found a new engineer, and Nikoyama found people who could appreciate his work, and more importantly, gave him some criticism that he needed to accept, as often they also do come with good feedback.
批評は一方的なもの、評価はつながるためのものだ。
Try to tell that to any stands of any fandom, and you'll more likely get eaten alive. With that, the flashback finally ended, and as we said last week, our little green programmer finally figured out the obvious lesson of this arc, that sometimes you need a little feedback and cooperation to get the job done, as he asked for help from the other company guys. And together, the four developers did a little techno-babble to save the day, though there were parts that were likely familiar to anyone who's worked in programming, in particular how they had to use Magilumiere's middleware to coordinate and connect their efforts. And yeah, interestingly, the most action in this episode wasn't so much the magical girls using their fancy magic, but more this group of nerds tapping hard on their keyboards, which, hey, I can dig, especially as someone who's currently typing this damn script. With that, the guy was successfully pacified, and afterwards, the other developers wanted to beat the guy who designed their middleware.
泣いてる。なんだあの人。
It's just kind of what he does. Also, I just realized one of these developers was voiced by Ken, so yeah, it kind of makes this being with Koga a bit of a Yu-Gi-Oh! GX reunion. But yeah, Koga literally finally stopped playing his games and went to see the fallout, and more importantly, tried to do some scouting of his own.
何言ってんだこの前髪太い。
Hey, he told me, let's not go there. Of course, the guy was trying to pull a Disney and just buy out the competition, which you know, might not exactly work out the best in the long run, just saying. But yeah, when not in front of the press, this guy would kind of show off his true colors, especially if he could just flex on the competition. However, Shikimoto actually did want to have a little talk with him over this current situation, as it seemed to be similar to an incident from the past, which really seemed to strike a chord to the point that Suga's usual calm demeanor completely cracked, and he was reduced down to just 2 frames of motion. Yeah, the low quality animation here was pretty noticeable, but at least it was mostly contained just here, and it at least got across the intensity of this exchange well enough. Enough that Oikawa was able to realize that these two knew more than they were letting on, and Shikimoto had even seemingly been training his employees for this sort of occurrence. The Magilumiere president didn't bother to explain the past incident, but did explain how the current one was likely because of a highly concentrated amount of magic at the expo that strengthened the Kai. Oikawa was a little confused by this, as it would be like pesticides strengthening bugs, which is actually a thing, as they can develop resistance to the chemicals, which, that's not good. With that, the episode ended with Shikimoto telling Midorikawa how his talk with Koga went, and how they needed to switch to Plan B. Of all of the social commentary in this show, this is just more of it, but at the same time, it did resonate a little more with guys like me. It's a good message about how we do have to sometimes temper our expectations when it comes down to our hobbies as we enter into the job market. Nikoyama might have lucked his way into a company that does fully appreciate him, but at the same time, he did also have to still learn about accepting criticism. As cynical as it might sound, many jobs these days do expect employees to play strictly by their rulebook. It might sound unfair at first, but often it's also for the betterment of the company. That was the story of Nikoyama, and likely a lot of us fresh out of high school. As while we can try to find, or luck our way into companies with more flexible standards like the startups that they really try to push in the series, we should also be open to criticism, as they often go hand in hand with constructive feedback. These are all good lessons for the obvious social recluse in Nikoyama, who with his normal shyness wouldn't have been able to ask for help, and yet with the words of Shikimoto and the encouragement of the rest of his company, he really became the MVP of this arc. And with the close of it, we immediately moved into the start of the next one, with interesting hints at Shikimoto and Koga's past that also seem to tie in with the greater threat of the Kai. Needless to say, I'm looking forward to some good lore and world building soon, but for this episode and arc, it was overall pretty great and really struck a chord with me at least. Sometimes we do have to separate our hobbies from our work, but as long as we keep those obsessions in check where they should be, it should all work out somehow in the end. Thanks for watching, and to all my viewers here in the States, I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving. Mine was pleasant enough, mostly because my family is mostly apolitical, so thankfully no talks about recent events, even though that stuff could have been entertaining. And if you haven't seen it yet, we also did do a short reacting to the announcement of the next Precure series. Do check it out, as finally YouTube got around to making longer shorts a thing. And until next time though, for now my friends, and yeah, I think I need to start working off the holiday pounds, and well, at least the beach is right here.